22nd, 1941. The armies of Nazi Germany crossed the frontier of occupied Poland into Soviet Russia. The hard young veterans of lightning war sweep into action like Sunday picnickers. Hitler will review his troops in Moscow on November 7th. He said so. It's on his timetable. His timetable has never failed. July 12th, the German High Command reports the Stalin line pierced at all points. October 3rd, Hitler says Russia is broken and will never rise again. You hear that, Bolshevists? Our Führer says you are beaten. Therefore, you are beaten. But along the battlefront echoed the ominous words of Hitler's own military expert, Ewald Banse. Russia can never be finally pinned down and beaten on her own territory. The Germans slashed deeper into Russia. They captured smoke. And through the smoke, the Red Star mocked them. Hitler wasn't in Moscow on November 7th. Everywhere, tough Russian soldiers waited for the Reichswehr. Patient in the woods, silent in the scant cover of the fields, deadly in the foxholes. Marshal Timoshenko matched the German strategy. The Cossacks under Budyeni countered German tactics. Voroshilov's brigades parried German thrusts. Fierce guerrillas stung the Germans from behind like angry hornets. Labor shock troops sweated 16 hours a day on the earthworks. Litvinov's children took their turn with the rest. People's regiments, armed in every village. Peasants lashed their cattle back from the German lines. They fought with sticks. They fought with muskets. They show the German a new brand of total war, a war of ruthless destruction, a war of fire and scorched earth. Plodding forward, the advancing Germans found nothing to capture but the shells of towns, seared, dead, deserted. Captured German divisions heard the voice of Joseph Stalin. The enemy expected that at the first blow we should be routed, but the enemy miscalculated. He did not realize the strength behind our lines. He did not realize the determination of our peoples. Before the eyes of an astonished world, a miracle took place. Russia, enigma of the past, showed the world that she too had a secret weapon. Her new weapon was the united might of a young nation with a new faith. This is the union of Soviet Socialist republics. It's 7,000 miles from corner to corner. This is the country Hitler failed to conquer, the country that tore up Hitler's timetable. It's 1/6 of the land area of the world. Russia has 3 rivers longer than the Mississippi. She plants 10 times as much wheat as Canada. In Russian forests stands 1/3 of all the timber in the world. The ground never thaws along 4,000 miles of Russia's Arctic coast. But along her southern frontiers, the sheep herders sweat in the heat of unending summer. The spirit of Russia is lusty as the land. They dance today as hard and vigorous and fast as when the Tsars ruled in St. Petersburg. Remember the old Russia? The holy Russia of the Tsars, of imperial droshkis with their padded drivers, of bearded Grand Dukes, stiff with courtly pomp. The old Russia, where the peasants' feet were stiff with cold. The old Russia that was farmed by 12 million wooden plows. They were slaves, bartering rags in the lousy, huddled villages. They were starved, silent, and afraid. (1917) Nikolai Lenin and a new Russia, conceived in revolution, born in war and bloodshed. We must give the workers a new and shining prospect, one for all for one. Today, this is the city where they whimpered for rags. This is the traffic in the tracks of the Tsar's droshky. In 1922, the Soviet Planning Commission surveyed the country's needs and how to fill them. For the first time, history saw a people plan its own future and build to the plan. The first 5-year plan was the blueprint of power. Russia borrowed the experience of the most able English and North American technicians. Mighty dams arose, like the giant powerhouse of Dnieprostroi. Russia worked to achieve Lenin's ideal. From each, according to his ability. To each, according to his needs. The new power was built for the people's needs. The second 5-year plan turned the spotlight on the farms. The land to the peasants, said Lenin. And in place of the Tsar's wooden plows, Russia built 250,000 giant cooperatives, modern in organization, modern in outlook. 160,000 Russian women learned to drive tractors. And as fast as Russian factories could build machinery from Canadian and American models, the tractors rolled out onto the rich earth to plow, to cultivate, to harvest. In place of the Tsarist rag markets, giant cotton plantations spread across the hot, dry southern provinces like Uzbekistan. Cotton was harvested into mountainous loaves for the gins and the looms that would process it for shirts and sheets, women's dresses, and hospital dressings. $200,000 combines harvested 250 million acres of wheat. There were exactly 100 combines in Germany at this time. And week by week, Russia was breaking new land, 1/4 of a world away from Berlin. Soviet leaders made a blitzkrieg against ignorance. 100 million Russian men, women, and children were taught to read and write, and the time it takes a Canadian child to finish high school. Soviet leaders knew that the most vital crop in all Russia was the crop of 2.5 million children springing up every year. So in 100 different languages, the Soviet teachers trained them to become the rulers of a new socialist state, to learn quickly, to grow strong, to inherit the wide acres and the mighty industries built by the people for the children of the people. Quickly as they could learn, workmen advanced to higher studies. They raced to master the sciences behind the machines they were building. They thrilled to the challenge of the new Russian creed. Workers struggle now not for a greater share of the production, but for a greater production in which to share. Into authority came young men, workers like Stakhanov, who found how to make the mines and mills double and triple their production. And from this aristocracy of labor, the 100 million Russian voters chose 600 deputies for the Soviet Council of the Union. They met in the name of the people, the worker and the peasant, the hammer and the sickle. Defense commissars like Timoshenko sat in their councils, for Russians knew that hungry eyes were on their rich land and on their new gigantic industry. She had no illusions about the future. Frontier guards patrolled her vast perimeter, from the hot sands of Turkestan deserts to the cold rocks above the Arctic Circle. Russia had 14 military academies, where the most brilliant students advanced into the ranks of the permanent army. Every Russian who reached the age of 18 served his term of compulsory military service. The old Russian genius in mathematics burned bright. It produced planes like the savage Stormovik fighter, which the world now recognizes as deadlier than the Messerschmitt. 2.5 million men were the peacetime strength of the Red Army. Each May Day in the Red Square, Russian leaders reviewed an army that gave a glimpse of Russian strength, of mobile, streamlined brigades. Each fresh maneuver of the peacetime Red Army established new methods of war. Russian skies first saw the deadly thistledown of parachute troops. Thousands of paratroopers trained while the rest of the world laughed. Russian snows first felt the swift skis of white-hooded ski troopers, winter commandos. Racing to be prepared against attack, Russia sent scientists like world-famous Jacob Schmidt, flying 4,000 miles east of Moscow to hunt the snow-covered hills for safe new sites for Russian industry. 400 such expeditions put huge new cities on the map of Siberia. Russia invested men and steel and power in the wastes of the steppes, far out of range of an invader's bombers. And from giant new plants, a wealth of fresh resources came pouring west to strengthen her European frontiers. Safe behind the Urals were growing oil fields that could ensure against the loss of the rich Caucasian shales. Second Baku pumped out a mounting river of oil. New potential munitions plants paid for the cost of their peacetime development with a fat dividend of trucks for the farms of European Russia. Watching Hitler's every move, Russia trusted nothing but her own strength. She buried vital industry deep in her heartland. This is the Russian secret of defense. Defense in vast depth. The vastness that Lenin meant when he said, "We will withdraw to the east, to the Urals. If need be, we can go beyond the Ural Mountains, but we will stand together." Big new cities rose far from the German frontier. Komsomolsk, city of young communists. Sverdlovsk, named for the commissar who signed the Tsar's death warrant. Magnitogorsk, magnetic mountain, largest iron reserve in the world. Magnitogorsk in 10 years hit a production of 6,000 tons of steel a day. Steel for Russia's tanks. Steel for Russian gun barrels. On the shores of Lake Balkhash, the world's biggest copper smelters smoked as they turned the rich ores into metal. Russian industry was racing with history, racing with destiny. Workmen whose fathers were wild-eyed horsemen brewed red copper for shells and bullets. Russia put big jobs into women's hands. Women took over 70% of Russian industry. Women, with full rights as comrades, talked on equal terms to men in offices and factories. Europe already beneath the heel of the conqueror, the new Russia sent a message of hope. Our task is to pull poverty and darkness and slavery out by the roots. Herein lies our strength. One for all, and all for one. But Hitler has his own plans. Germany attacks. Molotov calls Russia to arms. Mobilization orders for every man over 17 and under 46. Martial law from the Baltic to the Black Sea. The Civilian Defense League called to arms at threatened points.
Не допустили нарушения границы, и поэтому
In a single word, Russia answered Hitler's challenge. The word was dedites, fight. It rang from the bearded lips of the old guerrilla fighters. It was the word on the lips of the tough young sergeants. It inspired women doctors like Surgeon Sofia Klitina, who carried 20 wounded Red soldiers out of the front lines by herself. Young partisans like Alexander Chikalin laughed in the faces of the Germans who hung him, laughed and said, "You cannot hang us all. There are too many of us. We shall win." The democracies rushed their munitions experts, Harriman and Beaverbrook, to Moscow. The smart young soldiers of the Red Star showed them a fighting nation holding the new front line. Reports of Russian bravery stirred the hearts of free men everywhere. English workingmen cheered Soviet envoy Ivan Maisky in London. Canadian workers in Montreal rushed to finish tanks for the armor divisions of fighting Russia. Canada sent her new tanks to a new ally. In U.S. harbors, supplies swung aboard the freighters. On charts of the United Nations, a new convoy line appeared, east and north from the New World, along the lonely, dangerous Great Circle course to far-off Archangel. While Western weapons were on their way, Red soldiers showed the Germans that Russian munitions production was more than a Bolshevist boast. To their dismay, the Germans discovered the real meaning of defense in depth. They found defense in depth over hundreds of miles of Russian fronts. They found defense in the depth of angry and united Russian hearts. They found the meaning of the Russian guerrilla oath, "I swear I will not lay down my arms until the last fascist in our territory is destroyed. I swear to avenge myself bitterly, mercilessly, and ceaselessly." From the trenches of Leningrad to the gates of Rostov, they stood to arms all through the bitter winter of 1941. All winter long, they wrote across the blood-stained snow a chapter of heroism of which the greatest armies of history might be proud. And come what may on this 2,000-mile battlefront, where the titanic forces of the swastika and the red badge of courage struggle for dominion over 1/6 of the Earth's surface, Russia knows that her true war power lies not alone in arms and equipment, but in the inner spirit of her peoples. And today, across the vast spaces of steppe and tundra, the men and women of the new Russia are reading the message which the Red Star, shining from the smoky windows of giant munitions plants, sends forth into the night. We are strong because we have the faith.